The overall purpose of this is to be able to look at multiple characteristics of Hellenistic art and view the context behind the art pieces to better understand and appreciate their value. We will be looking at 10 different artifacts that all tie together to a singular overarching theme. Hellenism for its time was something profound. It was the switching of life revolving around the gods to individualism, humanism, and naturalism. This personification of Greek ideas and culture had such a big impact on surrounding areas, particularly impacted the Romans. The sculpture of Emperor Claudius is a Roman art piece that was influenced by Greek art style. When you observe the details and themes of this art, you can see that it was influenced by the Hellenism style of the Greeks. The detail that goes into the physical aspects of the sculpture to showcase the sexual appeal along with the power and strength. The body and language of the statue also supports these same themes. The typical themes of the Greeks were adapted slightly in this Roman artwork, but it is still evident just how much influence the Greeks had over the Romans. The next artifact is the Granicos monument, which was put in the first temple of Rome. The temple that these statues were put in was built in a purely Greek style. It is important to remember that the first temple of Rome and several of its artifacts, such as the Granicos monuments, were made using a Greek style. Hellenism had such an influential impact on the Romans that it was incorporated into several of their great artworks. The Granicos monument is part of a group that consisted of 25 equestrian bronze statues. This monument was made with bronze, which was favored by the Romans for their finest works. The Granicos monuments were made during a time to make a visual impression of Roman triumph. Even when Rome was showcasing their power and triumph, they were incorporating Hellenistic ideas that they had been influenced by. As people switched their traditional beliefs to be more Hellenistic ideas, the ideas of sexualizing and humanism became more profound. This included incorporating Hellenism into Greek mythology, such as the Faun, a half-human, half-goat creature. It is no surprise that sculptures of mythology would be made by the Greeks, but how they presented him is what was so fascinating. The Barberini Faun is a Greek sculpture that is profound in its time because of its Hellenistic aspects. When you observe the Barberini Faun sculpture, you can see how downplayed his animal characteristics are. The reason this was done is to maximize the humanism shown in this art piece. Oftentimes, men or male gods were sculpted to showcase their power and strength. However, in the sculpture, the purpose is to make him seem as an object of desire. It is meant to evoke eroticism, which was a new idea to the Greeks during this time. We see it was common for Greeks to sculpt creatures of mythology, but it was typical for them to sculpt gods as well. Apollo was a Greek god and one of the 12 Olympians. The Greek held the god of Apollo in high esteem, but when transitioning to Hellenism, their ideas began to change, which is seen in how they created sculptures of him that were made during this earlier era of the Hellenistic period. The Apollo of Cyrene is an original Hellenistic piece of artwork. Since this piece of artwork was made during the earlier era of the Hellenistic period, we can see how the Greeks were transitioning. A major aspect of Hellenism is humanism, which was a completely new way of thinking for the Greeks. Humanism is the idea that you look to yourselves and not to the gods. In this sculpture, the Greek god Apollo is humanized. He is shown more to be an object of desire than a being of power. There are several aspects of Hellenism that make it unique from the traditional Greek way of thinking. One way of thinking that changed during the social and political change is the idea of individualism and humanism, but also how they showcased beauty. Typically, women were objects of desire sought out by men. But that idea began to change through Hellenism. Women began to be depicted in a whole new way. The Venus de Medici is a Greek sculpture that was invoked as a universal standard of beauty. The sculpture is very different in comparison to the Barberini Faun and Apollo of Cyrene because it is not meant to evoke desire. This piece in particular is unique because of the anatomy of it. She is not shown as an object of sexual desire but as a dignified woman. Showing the Venus de Medici more dignified gives her more of a sense of individualism, which was a whole new aspect of Hellenism. Another artwork with similar aspects would be the Venus de Milo, which has long been an ideal for female beauty. It is important to remember the audience and the context of the sculpture was made during. During this time, there was a dramatic change from traditional Greek ideas to a more dynamic social change. Having that in mind gives a better understanding as to why this artwork is more subtle and conservative. This piece of art displays the idea of individualism for women by using a creative visual effect. A piece that deals with feminine beauty while still having a background of Greek mythology would be the Three Graces. The artwork still deals with Greek mythology since the Three Graces were the daughters of Zeus. However, in the sculpture, their depiction is not based on what roles each of them would play at being a deity, but rather focuses on the subtle, dignified beauty of women. The Three Graces were found when the Italian government took the territory of Tripolitania from the Turks. The sculpture was ascribed to be from the Hellenistic age, which is why it exhibits Hellenistic aspects. The art piece is meant to display a beauty and elegance amongst women. The purpose of this artwork was not to dignify the deities, but to exemplify the beauty of women without sexualizing them. As Hellenism began to spread, more so did the way of thinking. Hellenism stemmed from philosophy, which was a dramatically different way of thinking than the traditional way. As Hellenism grew, more people became more interested with nature and the body. This way of thinking brought out many aspects of art, such as emotion, character, mood, and nature. The torso of youth is a Greek sculpture that has been replicated amongst Romans. Romans often looked to the Greeks for artistic inspiration and would copy Greek works. When analyzing this artwork, you can make an educated guess on the specific stance of the statue. Looking at the pose of the hips, It shows that the statue was originally standing on the weight with the left foot. The statue is meant to show emotion through its body language and can even evoke a mood by the detailing of it. It is important to remember the context behind these pieces and when they were created. During this time, people were cooped up in large towns, called a polis, by artificiality of city life, which is why they craved nature and simplicity so much. Given this context helps show why many sculptures show aspects such as nature and mood, since it is what Hellenism inspired. The statue of the boy strangling the goose displays many standard themes of Hellenism. Observe the statue and see the emotion that is shown not just on the boy, but even on the goose. In the boy's action of strangling the goose, motion is shown. Many traditional Greek works of art did not show motion, but more of a stance of power. The sculpture also shows aspects of nature, which is something Hellenism very much inspired. Eros is a Greek god of love, sex, lust, and infatuation, and could have easily been depicted as a statue that shows any one of those aspects to evoke desire and sexual appeal. But this art does not focus on those aspects, but instead has centralized themes of Hellenism, which is important because that in itself shows the transition from traditional Greek way of thinking to Hellenism. The statue of Sleeping Eros is a fascinating piece of work that displays different types of aspects that make it Hellenistic. This piece was meant to show emotion. The artists of its time were able to use their precise observation of physical appearance to better give their sculpture emotion. This specific artwork showcases a newfound way of portraying emotions which appear infinite. Another aspect that Sleeping Eros shows is nature, which is something that the Greek people often expressed in their art. After observing the details and context of these 10 artifacts, you can see several ways that Hellenism was expressed. You're able to see the dramatic change from the traditional Greek way of thinking to a new philosophical way of thinking and expressing oneself in a dramatically new way. Through this, you also see the transitions that the Romans made because of just how influential Hellenism truly was.